Hello, everyone. This is the 227th episode of Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I welcome back Mr. Davey Naylor as we discuss the England national team during the 1982 World Cup. Mr. Naylor is the administrator of EnglandStats.com. Welcome back, Davey.
Hi, how you doing?
So let's go back in time. When thinking of the 1982 World Cup, it's almost unthinkable to believe that England had not been in a World Cup in over a decade. Can you paint a picture of that reality in contrast to the European club competitions that England were dominating?
It was quite a ridiculous period of time. The English teams had dominated European football for 5, 6 years, and yet the national team couldn't get in to the most prestigious competition of all. Very frustrating. To be honest, I was far too young to remember this, but during the 70s, it would have been a source of national embarrassment, I would expect, of why England couldn't go to first the World Cup in West Germany in 74 and then in Argentina in 78. So yeah, bafflement more than anything. I will say that England did have two particularly very hard groups in those years, but they were still playing quite regularly good football in the retrospective ELO rankings. They were still in the top five teams, so it makes it even more baffling why England couldn't qualify. Mostly because those days qualifying tournaments, they were much smaller groups, but only the top team went to a World Cup. You wouldn't get any of the playoff sort of like structure that we have now, where you get multiple chances of, if you don't win your group, you come second and you go to a playoff. Or then even if you don't come second, if you've won your Nations League group the year before, you still get another chance. There's no second chances in the 70s. So if you don't do it on the night, then you ain't going to the World Cup. And they had some striking games in those times. One of them springs to mind, the game against Poland at Wembley, that I think a lot of people might remember, to not deny them a World Cup place. It was baffling time for a lot of people, especially with all the European teams doing so well, and a lot of English exports to the continent as well. The English players were not exclusively playing in England, they were playing in continental football, which showed you the strength of the English game at the time.
So virtually an entire generation of players missed on the World Cup experience in this era.
Including probably, arguably, the world's European best player, Kevin Keegan, Ballon d'Or winner.
Double Ballon d'Or winner, in fact. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, had never until this tournament kicked a ball in a World Cup, and his career would actually only consist of, I think, 24 minutes
Yeah.
of a World Cup match for reasons we'll get into.
Ron Greenwood had been appointed in 1977 following the controversy of Don Revie leaving his post. He was seen as a safe pair of hands in contrast to Brian Clough. Greenwood's tenure had included qualifying to the 1980 Euros, but also some instability. What can you say about him and his status at this point?
After the disaster which ended Don Revie's tenure, that ended in utter, very bizarre circumstances, with him not attending one match on the pretense that he's scouting another match. Actually, where he was having a job interview in the Middle East, and then the FA sacking him. Well, he resigns first, but then they were going to sack him and then banning him from all football for 10 years. So yeah, very controversial that happened. So yes, Greenwood, they felt that they needed someone who wasn't so controversial. But my stance has always been with someone like Clough is that the FA, he might well have been very qualified. It's always something every Englishman of that age will always wonder what it would be like if Clough ever became England manager. But it was never something the FA were ever going to consider. They didn't like Clough. Don't forget, in those days, the FA were a fusty old group of old men sitting in a boardroom smoking cigars and pipes. They were never going to appoint a controversial figure like Brian Clough to the most prestigious job in English football. That was never, ever, ever going to happen, especially after what happened with Revie. So, Yes, I can see how they went with Greenwood because they thought that he would have been a safe pair of hands at the time. Probably not the best choice, but we need somebody who's stable. Ironically, because of some poor performances during his tenure, he nearly did actually resign after the qualifier against Hungary, but they managed to. Well, they effectively you could argue they persuaded him to stay on, but I think they probably just said no, you're staying on because in those times you couldn't really get out of contracts as such. I mean, who knows? I mean, nobody knows what that contract was, but I should think probably it was like they told him, nope, we're not firing you. Off you go. They did
The
have Bobby Robson lined up before the World Cup, so they knew that they were going to change after that World Cup. So they said, well, no, but Robson is contracted. We've already done the deal, so you're going to have to see out the World Cup, matey. Sorry. And it didn't go too badly for him.
You already mentioned Kevin Keegan, so the team was led by 1970s veterans such as the double Ballon d'Or winner Kevin Keegan, as well as the likes of Trevor Brooking and Mick Mills, who still had never played in a World Cup, as you mentioned. It was the fact that this could be their one and only World Cup, always part of the narrative in the 1982 qualifiers.
I think it was more along the lines of this is last chance saloon, boys. This is the last chance you'll get to do this. I don't think that any of them were ever contemplating staying on till 86. I'm not entirely sure that they would have done that. Bobby Robson, when he came in, made sure of that by not selecting them. He basically doubled down on that and said, look, okay, I need a fresh start here. So the likes of Keegan, Brooking, Mick Mills, who captained the side during the World Cup run, it was effectively, yes, this is your chance to get there. And the qualifying run did go, well, it had its ups and downs, but they did managed to qualify with especially a very famous result losing away in Norway, which a lot of people might
Yeah.
remember. The famous commentary. Well, I think you've got a question about that. There was a lot of stuff that England had to sweat it out for over 2 months, basically. These were also the days when teams arranged their own fixtures. Nowadays, UEFA or FIFA they actually arrange the schedule and arrange the fixtures. But back in the 70s and early 80s, the teams would negotiate effectively when to
Yeah.
play. And depending on their own league season, I guess if you had a bit more clout, you could get your fixtures however you wanted. So you could play your hardest games in the most appropriate time during your league season. But they used to negotiate themselves. So not all the matches were played at the same time. So by the end of it, the other teams in the group, like Romania and Switzerland, had 3 games left to play, where England only had one. So it got very difficult at certain points because England could not do anything about their fate. They had to wait for other teams to play. Luckily, teams like Romania that only managed a further 2 points from their 3 games, and Switzerland only 3 points from their remaining 3 games. Don't forget, it's 2 points for win at the time. And England went into the last game knowing only a draw would be enough to see them through. So there was a lot of sweating it out. And of course, you can imagine what the English press were doing all the time during all of this
Yeah,
because
and don't forget, I think there was an imperative to qualify because this was an enlarged World Cup with 24 teams, so 2 teams could qualify from the group.
that's right. England were in Group 4 of the 82 World Cup qualifying with Hungary, Romania, Switzerland, and Norway. And 2 of those teams would qualify automatically, whereas previously it was only one. So, like famously in 74, Poland took their place. But anyway, it seemed to be a little bit easier to qualify. England weren't necessarily up against it against other European powerhouses qualifying. So, yes, it was most definitely last chance saloon for a lot of players.
England's rivals in this World Cup qualifiers, their main rivals were Hungary. Other members in this group were Romania, Switzerland, and Norway. This qualifying campaign included the infamous loss to Norway in September of 1981. The whole Maggie Thatcher, your boys took one hell of a beating commentary. It includes Ron Greenwood's resignation on the plane on the way back from Hungary when England had won 3-1 in June of 1981. And in fact, the senior players persuaded him not to resign on the plane. So this was a very difficult campaign for England to qualify. I've mentioned this in other podcasts of the European nations. England had the worst record of any of the qualifiers. Just to think about it, Republic of Ireland, Wales, they got, I think, 10 points in their qualifying groups and they didn't even qualify. England had 9 points in the qualifying campaign and they had three losses. They qualified mainly by the virtue of defeating Hungary home and away. So it was not easy to qualify for England.
Which is in stark contrast to way that they were playing friendlies at the time. That they were
After,
winning.
oh yes, after qualification, yeah, that's another contrast in form.
So here you have the contrasting form of the European teams and English players in general in Europe. The way that England national team were beating some decent opposition in meaningless friendlies, but then qualifying. I mean, what you could technically say was a reasonably easy group. They were struggling. It was very
They
baffling, and you
they
could see why.
lost to
And you
Romania,
and then
Switzerland,
you
and
throw
Norway away from home.
yeah. So yeah, they managed to mess it up. It relied on other teams to also mess things up for them, losing in Norway, but then they beat Northern Ireland 4-0. They beat Wales 1-0.
They beat the
They beat
Dutch.
Netherlands 2-0 just before going to the tournament. 4-1 in Finland directly before they go to the 82 World Cup. They kind of like hit form at the right time, but they do squeak in. They
Yeah,
squeak into this tournament. And it so could have been a third tournament in a row that they failed to get to. It
yeah.
so could have been that. Just one goal here, one goal there, or two teams, as it was out of their hands, if two teams had scored and managed to score a few more points. Yes, ifs and buts.
During the qualifiers, we're still in the era where Ray Clemence and Peter Shilton alternated as starting goalkeepers. Can you discuss this situation? And at what point did Greenwood make the decision to install Shilton as a starter?
Well, this has always been a thing for me because I'm pretty sure that Greenwood, I don't know if he knew who his best keeper was. That's why he decided. They both were fantastic goalkeepers. I don't really know too much about their club form. I mean, of those two players, I know obviously you could say that they were both England's number one at some point. So what Greenwood did, he would just alternate them. He would just now Shilton has 125 caps for England. He's the most capped player at the time of recording. But you imagine how many caps he could have had if he didn't do that, if he was just because he's made his debut in 1970. If he'd have played throughout the 70s and in 80s until till he retired after the 1990 World Cup, you think he probably would have been on, not quite 200, but probably near that. But there was a policy of alternating the two of them. I don't know why he chose Shilton over Clements. I don't know why. I guess he just knew he had to choose. And so that's what he did. Interestingly, he didn't give him the number one jersey in the World Cup. Actually, he did some weird stuff with the jerseys. He gave, other than the keepers who had the normal 1, 13, 22, and the captain who had number 7, every other player was given his number alphabetically by surname. So you had some really weird things like Trevor Francis playing number 8 and Brian Robson was number 16. It was very odd situation. So the Shilton Clements debate, I personally was always kind of like always a Shilton man. If you were going to ask me, I think I preferred Shilton to Clements, but I mean, I don't know, I don't really know the ins and outs of that rivalry as much as many people might.
Like you said, England's form after qualification, England were just impressive during the year 1982 ahead of the World Cup in the friendlies. This included, like you said, defeating Northern Ireland 4-0 as part of our home championship. Then they played a friendly against Athletic Bilbao, a club side, because that's where England were based. So that was in March. In April, they defeated Wales away from home. Trevor Francis scoring a winner. They defeated the Dutch in May at Wembley 2-0. Then a few days later, they defeated Scotland in a home championship, again away at Glasgow. Paul Mariner scoring. Then in two consecutive days, with all the enlarged group of players to choose from, on June 2nd, they tie against Iceland at Reykjavik. And on the following day at Helsinki, they defeat Finland 4-1. So very impressive in the preparatory friendlies. I'm not sure. Maybe when the pressure was off, maybe they performed better. Who knows why? But they were much
But yeah,
better in the friendlies than they were in the qualifiers.
absolutely. Can I just talk about those two friendlies against Finland and Iceland? Because it was a very, very odd thing that Greenwood wanted to happen. The FA accommodated him to a certain extent. So going into the World Cup, what Greenwood actually did, one of the first things he did was appoint other managers to various different positions around about. He did get Clough involved, but kind of like a more of a youth level. He got Brian Robson, who was sorry, apologies, Bobby Robson, who was at Ipswich at the time. He got him to come in for the under 21 sort of setup and B teams, sort of like teams. And he got them involved because he realised that part of Greenwood's legacy, he realised that not only did you need to nurture a team for the next generation, but you also needed to nurture sort of managers for the next. He needed to kind of like start a kind of like a little group of potential managers going forward that could look after the England team and the other England teams at youth level going into the next decade, because he knew that he wasn't really going to be there that long. So what he did, he got Bobby Robson in, he got Clough in, he got other people, other young managers in from different clubs, and got them involved in the setup. And so these two matches, originally the first match was supposed to be against Finland, but they had also arranged a B team international the next day against Iceland. And because he had still at the time, he'd called up a preliminary squad of 32 players, and he could only take 22 to the World Cup, so he needed to trim 10 players. So he decided to divide them in half of probables, which went and they played in Helsinki in 141, and the possibles, and they went to the Reykjavik B game. But then he thought, hang on a minute, I don't want them to think that they're playing a B game because he wanted to try and preserve the illusion of equality between the squads. So he asked the FA to upgrade that match to an international level. That's why it does stand out as a rather odd fixture with a very odd selection. You wouldn't see necessarily that starting lineup. People like Joe Corrigan in goal. You've got
Steve Perryman in his only cap.
Paul
Yeah.
Goddard and Steve Perryman. Yes, they come on. Perryman, for example, yeah, comes on. It's his only cap. He plays 20 minutes, and because of that change from being a B international to a full international, he does now get an England cap, which is great for him. Greenwood wasn't at that match, by the way. It was looked after by Bobby Robson. Bobby Robson was there in Reykjavik. Greenwood was in Helsinki, and they get away with a 1-1 draw after Iceland take the lead. But yeah, I just find that a very interesting way of doing things in the way that they managed it, because I don't think Greenwood was sure in his mind about who he was going to take. And he does take a few people. Obviously, Glenn Hoddle, for example, he plays in the Reykjavik match. He does take a few people from that, so he hadn't quite made his mind up.
Ahead of the World Cup, the Falklands War broke out. Now, there have been various reports that the non-participation of British teams was actually a possibility. Was this a topic of debate? Well, that you might not remember, but was this a topic of debate that you came across?
Well, the possibility of no British teams playing, yes, absolutely. I mean, that would definitely, but I don't think really there was talk slightly of whether if somebody did qualify, whether they might withdraw, because obviously Argentina was at that tournament. And of course, there were tensions, obviously, with being in a Spanish-speaking country and that. But the Falklands War ended just before the tournament started. So there were tensions about that. There were worries about that. There were security concerns. But I think they were mostly worried about the English hooliganism aspect rather than any kind of reaction to the Falklands War. Although I'm not playing that down, I'm just thinking that there were other more concerns. England gave FIFA and the Spanish authorities a headache, let's just say. And it might well have been if they might well have, I suppose, been a lot easier if they hadn't qualified, or if they had withdrawn, they would have sighed a big sigh of relief. But they didn't, and they went, and they were stuck out in Bilbao for a particular reason. I think that was so that they could. They all played all their group games in Bilbao, and like they would do 8 years later in Italy, they were put somewhere so they can contain the English fans, which were very notorious at the time.
The World Cup song is called This Time We'll Get It Right. What were your thoughts on that?
I have no thoughts on the World Cup song at all. It's not my area of expertise. I can't even recall it. I mean, it's not, you know what? I have no idea. It's not my kind of like thing really. All the frivolities that go on with around the England thing. I've never been a big footballers and songs don't mix. I mean, I'm getting flashbacks to Glenn Hoddle and Hoddle and Waddle. Just don't do it. Just, the Anfield rap. Oh, stop, stop. I just think footballers and songs are not something that should go. Oh no, actually, no. I'm now thinking of World Emotion, which was actually not quite bad, actually. No, no. I'll just say no. I have no thoughts on it. Sorry.
Well, let's take a look at the final 22 selected for this World Cup by Ron Greenwood. For goalkeepers, at number one, you have Ray Clemence of Tottenham. At number 13, Joe Corrigan of Manchester City. And starting goalkeeper, number 22, Peter Shilton of Nottingham Forest. Defenders, number two, you have Viv Anderson of Nottingham Forest. Number four, Terry Butcher, Ipswich. Number six, Steve Foster of Brighton. Number 12, Mick Mills of Ipswich, who would be the captain in the absence of Kevin Keegan. Number 14, Phil Neal, Liverpool. Number 17, Kenny Sansom, Arsenal. Number 18, Phil Thompson, Liverpool. Midfielders. Number 3, Trevor Brooking, West Ham United. Number 5, Steve Coppell, Manchester United. Number 9, Glenn Hoddle, Tottenham. Number 10, Terry McDermott, Liverpool. Number 15, Graham Rix of Arsenal. Number 16, Brian Robson, Manchester United. Number 19, Ray Wilkins, Manchester United. Strikers, number 7, captain of a team, Kevin Keegan, Southampton. Number 8, Trevor Francis at Manchester City. Number 11, Paul Mariner at Ipswich. Number 20, Peter Witt, Aston Villa. And number 21, Tony Woodcock, playing for FC Köln in West Germany. Now, we should point out that the following players did not make the final cut. You have defenders like Alvin Martin of West Ham United, Russell Osman of Ipswich, and Dave Watson of Stoke City. Midfielder Alan Devonshire of West Ham United, and strikers such as Peter Barnes of Leeds United, Paul Goddard of West Ham United, Tony Morley of Aston Villa, and Cyril Regis of West Bromwich Albion. And the following players were to be on standby. You have the Manchester United goalkeeper Gary Bailey. You have defenders such as Steve Perriman of Tottenham, Derek Statham of West Bromwich Albion, Tommy Catton of Manchester City, midfielders David Armstrong of Southampton, Sammy Lee of Liverpool, Dennis Mortimer of Aston Villa, and strikers such as Garth Crooks of Tottenham, Eric Gates of Ipswich, and Gary Shaw of Aston Villa. Over the years, it has been said that Tony Morley should have been involved after Aston Villa's Champions Cup run, where they won the prestigious trophy. Was he the most glaring absence?
Well, you could argue Peter With as well because he score the goal in the
Oh,
European
yeah.
Cup final. So probably he was very fast, very dynamic winger. I would say that Greenwood, being a cautious manager, he picked a more cautious team. That would be my only explanation, really, really. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Yes, Morley would have injected a lot of pace into the team, but I can only assume that Greenwood was his cautious approach. He decided against it. I don't know whether he would have seen much. Don't forget, he knew as well about both Keegan's injury and Brooking's injury as well. So I guess he needed backup for that. He needed people like Brian Robson and Ray Wilkins and people who could fill the void for this missing two, in that attacking midfield, striker sort of like position. So, and he could only take 22 players, of which three had to be goalkeepers. So he was taking a punt already, taking Keegan and Brooking. So I guess he felt that he couldn't punt one more time.
So let's get to the World Cup in Spain. England were based in Bilbao. In their group, you had France, Czechoslovakia, and Kuwait. Their first opponents were France. And France, you have a lot of familiar names: Michel Platini, Alain Giresse, Rocheteau, Tigana, Battiston. Very good French side. This match was played under scorching heat at Bilbao on June 16th. For England, we have the following lineup: Shilton, Mills, captain of the team; Sansom, he'd be replaced by Phil Neal in the 90th minute; Thompson, Butcher, Robson, Coppell, Ricks, Wilkins, Mariner, and Francis. And of course, we all know what happens in the 27th second. You have the fastest goal in this World Cup when Steve Coppell's throw in from the right side was flicked back by Terry Butcher and volleyed by Brian Robson. France did tie the match in the 26th minute with a long range shot from Gerard Soler. Incidentally, this would be the only goal conceded by Peter Shilton in this World Cup. England would storm back in the second half. Like I said, it was so hot, I think the French just gave up from the heat. In the 67th minute, you have Trevor Francis crossing from the right side and Brian Robson heading in his second goal. And in the 83rd minute, you have Trevor Francis's shot. It was deflected by Marius Trésor into the path of Paul Mariner, who scored. This was the fifth straight match that Paul Mariner had scored in, and he became the first Englishman to do so since Jimmy Greaves in 1961.
Yep.
So England started impressively, defeating France, started the World Cup in the best possible manner.
Well, you know the old adage, it's a game of two halves, Brian. Well, this is like a game of these are two teams that do completely the opposite things. England start so well, 27 seconds, which was at the time, I don't know whether it's actually been broken. Is it still the fastest ever goal
No, it's
scored in
not
a World
anymore.
Cup?
I think Hakan Şükür's goal in
That's
2002
right, yeah.
World Cup. Yeah.
But it certainly was. It was at the time. I think that England had scored earlier. I think Tom Finney or someone like that might have scored earlier than that. But it was on record. I think it was the second fastest England goal ever. But I think that first one was in a friendly or something. I'm not entirely sure. That really, it certainly is most definitely the fastest England has scored in a major competition. And they come out of the blocks and they beat a good France team. You read some of the names there. They are some absolutely fantastic footballers, but they haven't been as consistent, and they're still a young team and they're growing into it and they'll become even better. So England play them at a very good time, and France slowly come into the tournament and slowly get better and better and better, where England do the exact opposite. They start brilliantly and then it starts sort of like they win. Well, we'll get on to the matches as we'll go through the matches. You'll see what happens. But yes, it's absolutely brilliant start in the heat in Bilbao. England especially during that second half, are well in control, dismantling the French team. And what a way to win. And interestingly, there's one other stat, because you've nicked all my stats there, I was going to say, about Mariner's fifth successive international. But I've got another one for you. Phil Neal is brought on after Kenny Sampson goes down with cramp, and he also gets he hurts himself trying to tackle Platini. As right at the end of the game, it's like I think it's
90th
90
minute. Yeah.
90th minute. He comes on just as the referee blows the whistle for full time. It literally, his appearance is 11 seconds and he doesn't get
Oh,
anywhere near the ball. And according to my records, now, to all the games that I've seen before, and I've seen up to now, this is the shortest time anyone has been on the pitch to receive an England cap. 11 seconds. He's on the pitch, and most of that time is taking up from the sideline to his position. And then as soon as the free kick is taken,
match over.
they the match is over. Yeah.
The next match was on June 20th, again at Bilbao at San Mames against Czechoslovakia. And the familiar faces for Czechoslovakia, you have Zdenek Nehoda. They're managed by future Aston Villa and future Celtic manager Joseph Venglos. For this match, we have the following lineup: Shilton, Mills, captain of the team. Sansom, Thompson, Butcher, Robson. He replaced by Glenn Hoddle in the 46th minute. Koppel, Ricks, Wilkins, Mariner, Francis. Well, we should say that this would be a match to forget for Czechoslovakia's goalkeeper. In the 62nd minute, Wilkins' corner kick from the left side was mishandled by the Czech goalkeeper Seman. Francis knocked in the loose ball at the far post. A few minutes later, in the 66th minute, Mariners' cross from the right side was deflected by Joseph Barmos into his own net. England won 2-0 and already qualified to the second round. Incidentally, this was the first time in 33 matches that Ron Greenwood had named an unchanged England side.
Yeah, a very underwhelming performance by a fancied Czechoslovakia side with some great names in that team. Incidentally, Brian Robson, this is the start of Brian Robson's World Cup curse. He gets a groin strain in the first half and has to be replaced by Glenn Hoddle at half time, which rules him out of the next game. Now, he does come back for the second round games, but every World Cup that he appeared in, he managed to injure himself in and take no further part in. So you wouldn't know it yet, but the 86 World Cup, obviously, he dislocates his shoulder
Right.
during the game against Morocco. In the 1990 World Cup, I think it's the first game that he injures himself. So, yes, it's a disaster for him, his World Cup record. So he does come back into this tournament, but Greenwood's now thinking maybe I should have taken Morley now because I've lost my midfield. I mean, he's got Glenn Hoddle to come in, but Glenn Hoddle is one of those mercurial sort of like players who can play hot and cold. He can be absolutely awesome, but then he can also be absolutely awful. Which Hoddle will turn up? We're about to find out.
And as we can see, the surprise in the team is Graham Ricks, who not many had expected would take a starting role for the team. Do you remember if many were surprised that he was a starter for the team?
No, I can't. I guess he needed a left footer on that left midfield. So I'm guessing he's thinking, where you got such a solid player of Steve Coppell on the right hand side. It could be just my imagination. I did watch these games not so long ago, but they do try and channel a lot of things through Coppell. I mean, their primary attack does come down that right hand side. So obviously they do use the left occasionally, but I mean they have such a talent. Coppola was such a underrated player in my book. He was such a good winger. But no, I don't know if Ricks was a surprise or not. I don't know whether he'd been doing that at Arsenal on the left hand side during that time. I was very young. I was only 9.
So the last match in the group was on June 25th against Kuwait, which England were expected to defeat, of course, again at Bilbao at San Mames. Now, for this match, you have Peter Shilton, Phil Neal, Mick Mills, captain of the team, Phil Thompson, Steve Foster starting. This would be his third and final cap for England, all three of them in 1982. Glenn Hoddle, Steve Coppell, Ricks, Wilkins, Mariner, and Francis. And of course, you mentioned Brian Robson. He was rested along with Kenny Sansom. They were rested due to minor injuries, and Glenn Hoddle and Phil Neal replaced him in the starting lineup. And Terry Butcher was rested to avoid a second yellow card, so that's why Steve Foster started in his place. As far as the match, another underwhelming match. England won 1-0 in the 27th minute. Shilton's long kick was headed by Francis towards Mariner, who then backheeled it into the path of the onrushing Francis on the right side, who advanced to score. But that was it. England would have been expected to defeat Kuwait more heavily, but maybe they didn't exert themselves too much, just going through the motions, as that already qualified. That's all I can think of.
It was a possibility that Keegan and Brooking might have been brought on in this match. I mean, I think they could have. qualified without, even if they lost, I think.
Right, because they had 4 points from two
They had
wins.
four
Yeah.
points, and yeah, the other game, incidentally, France Czechoslovakia ended up with a draw. France having beating Kuwait as well. That's so
Uh,
England and France qualified. But he didn't. He, obviously, they weren't ready to come on. I think this was a very. We've got to just get through this again. The heat was a problem. It's interesting. This is the only time that England in any tournament have won all three of their group games. It's never occurred before or since. And it's the benchmark, even though it starts brilliantly. And then, so you get a 3-1, you get a 2-0, and then you get 1-0 against probably the weakest team. So you can see it tailing off already. Yeah, it's a routine win. It's against a very unknown team. Also, interesting to note in this game that the referee, the Colombian referee, has a really annoying habit of getting in the way. In the first half, he kind of like he blocks a shot by Hoddle in the second half, and Mariner actually receives a yellow card from him. So the sequence is Mariner's head of the ball, head of play, and the referee is just wandering in front of him, and just as he's about to get a pass from Ricks. So what he does, he just gives the referee a gentle shove out of the way. Excuse me, can you move out of the way? The ball's coming to me, and I think his name is Aristobal, Gilberto Aristasbal, I think. But anyway, he turns around, doesn't take too kindly to it, and books Mariner for pushing him. Get out of the way, ref. I thought that was funny. Little
yeah.
story.
And during the World Cup, there was a story that Keegan drove the car of a hotel staff member all the way to Hamburg to treat his injuries. What can you say about this episode?
I heard about the story. Yeah, so obviously Keegan is playing at Hamburg, and the reason why he's not playing is he's got a back injury. So his chiropractor's in Hamburg, but he can't obviously get there. I don't know the situation, but I mean Greenwood and the FA don't. No, you can't leave. Or if they do say yes, you can leave, but you've got to go on your own account. So apparently he borrows a car from some guy in the hotel and drives all the way to Hamburg to have a back appointment, and then drives all the way back. It's bizarre. Would you ever believe that could happen these days? I guess he's so desperate. He wants to be fit. He wants to play a part in this game, this tournament. He's at desperate lengths, but it's bizarre that he has to do it on his own back, that the FA don't fly him there. Say, like, okay, get on a plane, we'll charter it. This is your captain of the team, the one man that could possibly lead you to a World Cup final, and you're not willing to do that. It can't possibly be as black and white as that. There must be something more to the story, but I find it quite a bizarre thing.
In the second round, England were in a group with West Germany and their Spanish hosts based in Madrid at Santiago Bernabeu. From this group, obviously only one team could qualify, and West Germany are one of the favorite teams. And this is a West Germany with the likes of Harald Schumacher in goal, Uli Stielicke, Briegel, Paul Breitner, Hansi Müller, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, Litbarski, many stars. For the second round, the match against West Germany is on June 29th at Madrid at Santiago Bernabeu. So for this match, you have Peter Shilton, Mick Mills, captain of a team, Sansom, Thompson, Butcher, Robson back in the squad, Copel, Ricks, Wilkins, Mariner, Francis. He'd be replaced by Tony Woodcock in the 78th minute, playing against some of his teammates. This match ended as a scoreless tie. West Germany could have won it when Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, like I think 5 minutes before the end, he has a long range shot that hits the bar. And that's the closest any of the teams got to win this match. And it ended as a scoreless tie. Incidentally, the day before the match, Bobby Robson was officially announced as the next England manager.
Yeah. For those people who are unaware of this format of the World Cup, so you had 24 teams, groups of four as normal. After that stage, though, instead of going to a round of 16, as like, for example, the European Championship does with 24 teams, what you did is the top two teams of those groups would go into a second round. So that's 12 teams. Now, how do you do knockout stage with 12 teams. Well, you don't. You do another group stage of 4 groups of 3, and they each play each other once. So that's 3 games, and then the top team of each of those groups go on to a semi-final. So effectively, what happens is the first game, 2 teams play, and 1 team sits out, and then the second team would. The rule was that the second team would play the loser of the first if there was a loser, and that's how you did it. So you didn't actually know if you were playing in the first game, you didn't know if you were going to be playing the second or the third game. If it was a draw, they had predetermined it. So if the first 2 teams drew, it would continue as normal. So basically, it went West Germany versus England, then it would be West Germany versus Spain, and then it would be Spain versus England. And because the first game ended in a draw, that they continued that sequence. So what happened in the second game after this is that actually West Germany beat Spain. So by I think it was 2-1.
2-1. Yeah.
So going into the next game, England had to score at least 2 goals, with West Germany not being able to do anything about it. This was the criticism of this format, is that because you would have to sit and watch other teams knock you out. Whereas nowadays, mostly you're either there on the pitch while the team knocks you out. You could do something about it, or you were playing a game simultaneously. But so it was a very, very odd format. What they
And
did
it's
in '86 is basically the exact same format as European tournaments have now. Whereas you get, 4 of the 6 third place teams go into the
right, right. Yeah.
go into the round of 16 draw. I mean, West Germany are a very good team, and of course, we know they're a very good team because they reached the final. And of course, West Germany during the 1780s, of course, they're a very good team. They're always a very good team. They always get to at least a semi-final. It must be so boring to be German in those times, always getting the semi-final. But yes, so you could say that this was a reasonably good result for England. The performance wasn't necessarily that good, knowing that the weaker team. Now that is weird to say that Spain was the weaker team, even with being hosts as well. But they were perceived at this time to be the easier team in this little mini group. So it wasn't all doom and gloom. And they felt if all they needed to do was score a couple of goals against Spain, and his semi-final, here we come.
Yes, and this match against the host Spain would be on July 5th, again at Madrid at Estadio Santiago Bernabéu. This would be the match where Keegan and Brooking would make their debuts, as well as their last international appearances. So for this match, we have Shilton, McMills, Sansom, Thompson, Butcher, Robson, Ricks. There would be a double substitution. In the 63rd minute, Graham Ricks would be replaced by Trevor Brooking, and Tony Woodcock would be replaced by Kevin Keegan. And these 27 minutes would be the only World Cup appearances of Kevin Keegan and Trevor Brooking. Then you have Wilkins, Mariner, Francis. Tony Woodcock had started as an extra striker in place of Copel as England desperately needed to win. Unfortunately for England, this match would end as a scoreless tie, and both England and Spain would be eliminated. Of course, it's famous also for that header miss by Kevin Keegan after he had come on. But in any case, this would be Kevin Keegan's 63rd and final cap for England. His first cap had been in 1972. For Trevor Brooking, this was his 47th and final cap, his first cap in 1974. Mick Mills as well. This was his 42nd and final cap for England. His first cap had been in 1972. And of course, the final match of Ron Greenwood as England manager. England were eliminated without losing a single match and conceding a single goal throughout the tournament. So there was some sense of, I imagine, of injustice and of frustration being eliminated in such a way, but at the same time, frustration for not scoring any goals in the second round.
Yes, that was basically it. As I said earlier, England started brightly and then it tailed off dramatically. The problem here is that they just could not find a net. And that Keegan miss, I think everybody's probably seen it. I mean, he's not even close. He really isn't. I mean, he's got so much time. I think it's a Brian Robson cross, actually, I seem to remember. But he has so much time and so much he could place it in the left-hand corner, the right-hand corner, and what he does, he just spoons off his head wide. To be fair to him, England would have needed to score another goal to be
Yeah.
sure of going through. West Germany had scored, beaten Spain 2-1. West Germany still would have gone through on goals for, would have been the next criteria. So they still need to score a second goal. So we can't really pin that on Keegan so much, although it is still an awful miss. Yeah, it's such a sad way to go out. I mean, if you get beaten by a better team, then there's some sort of comfort in that, I suppose. But not losing. Another gripe about this formation is that you can do that. Although you can still not go out and not by not winning. I think famously New Zealand did that in the
Oh yeah,
2010 World Cup.
2010. Yeah.
So it can still happen in modern days things, but I mean it is for such a chance to get to a semi-final, and again the story of England, and it would happen the next time with the hand of God, and then the next time with the penalties against Germany and Italy. This is the start of the frustration that Englishmen have with the World Cup. So you go for years, you go from winning it to then not appearing in it for a couple of editions, and then going almost so close that if only one thing had happened differently, something they might have won it.
I think it was a satisfactory performance given where they were during the qualifiers.
Absolutely, it's certainly a massive step up from the qualifiers where they were all over the shop, and especially the France game really is the standout game. Really, a very good France side who obviously get to the semi-finals themselves and play West Germany. It's another case of what could have been for a very good England team. And sadly, for the likes of Keegan and Brooking, that is their sum total. I don't even think it's 27 minutes. I think it's even less than that, actually, because I had it timed as 64th minute, actually, not
No.
six. So you knock a minute off. Sorry, guys.
Greenwood's time as England manager had been marred with not having a clear lineup, chopping and changing lineup from match to match. Why do you think it took him such a long time to come up with a clear formation by the time of this World Cup? Were England in a way victim of the typical long seasons with many matches and replays and inevitable injuries? So as a result, he could never really select a set squad.
Well, yes, and yes, of course, injuries always play a part. With ironic, with the English teams doing so well in Europe, sometimes he couldn't select some players because they weren't available. Don't forget, in those days you had international windows, but they were not necessarily all nicely coordinated as they are like you are today. You have your domestic league, and it all comes from FIFA or UEFA. Everything nowadays is you have a set windows to do everything. You have a European competition on midweeks and this week and that week and that week, and then your international windows are this week and that week, and it's all set down and everything has to be done at the same time, which is a godsend really for managers because they know where their players are going to be. It's still a headache for them because their players are flying off all over the world. For club managers and for international managers, it's also you've got them playing a lot of games. So at least they've tidied that up a bit. But yeah, but I mean, it's only excuses really. I mean, why he couldn't get a gel a team together. So since the debacle of the Revy era, he didn't have much time. He clearly didn't get on well with the English media. I mean, not that that's a thing that people do, but I don't know the answer to the question why he didn't find a gelling team. Yes, it doesn't help when your best couple of players aren't able to play. That certainly doesn't help. But we see the emergence. This is Brian Robson's first club. Terry Butcher, of course, is only 23, playing for Bobby Robson at Ipswich.
Paul
Um, you've got-
Mariner,
yeah, you've got some.
they
I
established
mean,
themselves. Yeah.
yeah, you've got some young talent coming through here. And don't forget, Peter Shilton is only playing his 42nd cap. He's got a long way to go yet, Shilton has. Even at 32, well, nearly 33. He's got a long way to go. So
At that time, Dino Zoff was 40 years old, so Peter Shilton is still a young goalkeeper in a
still a
way.
young in his terms, yes. Yes, I guess the World Cup, you could argue it was remembered, although I do remember it because interestingly, I was actually in Barcelona during the time, although not for the World Cup. My mother took us on holiday there. Bizarrely, why you'd go to holiday where there was a World Cup on, I don't know, but absolutely oblivious to it, my mother was, because she had a friend that she went to college with who was Spanish and lived in Barcelona. So we went to Barcelona, just so happened to be a World Cup on. And all this everything was going on around me. We didn't go to see a game, or I think we managed to watch one of a couple of games on the television, but I was only 9. Yeah, so it was a very weird experience for me. It was my first taste of World Cup football. But I guess to sum up, really, yeah, it was a kind of like a missed opportunity, end of an era. But I guess there was a bit of restored pride, I suppose. And with Bobby Robson now coming in to the setup, like everybody knows, a chance for transition out of the old 70s era into progressive English 80s football and riding on those European club successes of the late 70s into the early 80s and seeing if English football, English international football can progress. And of course, we've already talked about, we've done a series of podcasts on the Bobby Robson era, which starts the very next game, which I urge any of your listeners to go back and listen to because,
Yeah, our very first podcast with you.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
You do have younger players, like you said, the Robsons, the Wilkins, all those players who kind of Kenny Sansom in defense, who established themselves in this World Cup as the backbone of the future England team. But yeah, I keep coming back to this that it's so unbelievable to think that players such as Keegan and Brooking, their entire World Cup career amounted to those, like you said, 26 minutes, I guess, as you corrected me. And you have so Keegan, Brooking, Mick Mills, and Greenwood himself now were leaving the setup. So it definitely felt like the end of an era. It seemed like the 70s era was kind of ending with this World Cup in a way.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly what I've written. Yeah, it was still a kind of like a 70s style team. I mean, Greenwood had taken the 70s and pushed them firmly in the 80s, and it needed someone to bring everything back up to speed. I guess to answer your question earlier, maybe Greenwood was used as a stopgap. They didn't know what to do when Revie left so abruptly. So Greenwood was their best choice at the time. We've already discussed the reason why they didn't go with Brian Clough, and they needed to take their time to get a young upcoming manager. And Bobby Robson was an absolutely ideal choice. He was doing wonders at Ipswich, just like Sir Alf had done before him. So they saw him maybe as a new Sir Alf Ramsey coming through at Ipswich. And so, yeah, I thought, let's start again. We all know Bobby Robson, how that got on with some small tweaks. He may well have won a World Cup if a penalty shootout here, a hand of God there. Who knows? So I think definitely an end of an era, definitely a sea change into we are not going to be a team that doesn't qualify for World Cups anymore. And
Yeah.
when we get to World Cups, we're going to do something there.
To pick up on that theme, in closing, what is the legacy of this 1982 World Cup for England historically, culturally, and like we mentioned, was it in a way the reference point of the closure of the 70s and the dawn of a new cycle with Bobby Robson?
You're right. It was the end of the 70s football with Robson sacrificing players like Keegan. I mean, Keegan's only 31. Brookings a little bit older, 33. Mick Mills is only 33. I mean, their football careers are not over. Robson just decides that he doesn't want to go with that. He wants to be his own man and go with his own younger players like 25-year-old Brian Robson, 25-year-old Ray Wilkins, both Man United players at this time. He knows Paul Mariner. Ipswich. He knows Terry Butcher playing at Ipswich. Well, he knows McMills, I guess, because he's an Ipswich player as well. But he kind of like, he definitely wants to put his own stamp on it, and he definitely wants to do things his own way. I think the legacy of that World Cup was England are back, I think, after the mess of the last two World Cups. If you think about it, since England didn't have to qualify for the 66 World Cup, England then didn't have to qualify for the 1970 World Cup being champions. Then they failed to get to the 74 World Cup, failed to get to the 78 World Cup. There hasn't been a cycle of qualifying campaign and qualifying and being in a tournament since 1962, 20 years before. This is kind of like a new phenomenon for English fans. This is almost like a generational thing. And nowadays, England are very, very good at qualifying for tournaments. I mean, it's almost like,
It's a
I mean,
given that
England
they're
are
going to
the first
qualify.
European
Yeah.
team to have qualified for the current World Cup. That in those days, it was the other way around. They used to struggle to qualify for things, and then they used to do reasonably well in the tournament. But yeah, I guess most absolutely end of an era. Bob Newman coming in charge of the team, getting rid of some of the old dead wood. Although some could argue that the wood wasn't necessarily dead, but he wanted to stamp his authority on the team. There was a lot of pride back home with the way that the team played, and ifs and buts. We could have maybe got a little bit further if only that header, if only of this, if only of that, if Keegan and Brooking would have been fit. I mean, if you could imagine if Keegan and Brooking had been fit for the entire tournament, it might well have been a lot different. Absolutely. So a lot of future expectation that England are going in the right direction. So it's a tough time in the early 80s. Well, I had a tough time in the 80s. So, I'm sure everybody else did as well.
With that, I'd like
And that
to,
bombshell.
yeah, like to thank you once again for your participation in this interview. All our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, Davey, thank you once again and hope to continue these discussions on England football history.
Yes, thank you. And if anybody wants to look up any of those games, please go to englandstats.com where you can find all of those games thoroughly viewed and annotated for you, and other World Cup games as well. Every game, in fact, going back to all the way back to the 1870s. So go have a
Yeah,
look.
we should point out your tremendous work. Like I said in our very first podcast, anyone who's ever researched England national team online has undoubtedly come across your website. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
great. Yeah,
encourage
no,
everyone to check it out for
I'm
sure.
I'm what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to find old football matches so that I can view. Because what I want to do, I found so many errors in the archives, not just at the FA, but also in print as well. There are a lot of corrections that need to be made. So I'm slowly going through trying to find video evidence of old matches, and I've got quite a long way to go. I've kind of like my current research is where am I at my research? I've got through 391 matches, which is about only about 36%. I mean, obviously, some of the pre-TV days, I mean, I'm never going to be able to view, but I'm thinking anything after 1960 might well be on a dusty old VHS somewhere. So if anybody does have know anywhere of where I can get copies of old England games in their entirety so I can watch the whole thing, I'll be very grateful if they want to get in contact with me so I can. My plan is to get up to at least 500, which I think would probably take me back to 1960 if I get to 500. I'm nearly at 400 right now, and I've got about 20 or 25 games that I've still to go that I've got archived that I need to watch. But I found if you look for the games with, I do a little verified tick, a little green tick next to the game. That game has been fully vetted as correct. That's my aim, to try and make sure that everything is correct and right. So
Well,
thank you for listening to me for the last
yeah,
hour and a
well,
bit.
yeah, well, thank you for hard work.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.